today is Melanie Spring. Creative visionary Melanie has over 20 years of experience helping others build their personal and professional brands, giving them the tools to show up and show off. Melanie is a dynamic international keynote speaker, leadership development expert, and speaker trainer who works with entrepreneurs, business leaders, and CEOs of household brand names and Fortune 500 companies. I warmly welcome Melanie Spring. Welcome to BrandsTalk.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on my show today, Melanie. Yeah, Melanie, you are in the branding realm and you're always so much on brand. So first of all, I would like to know, what is the story behind the brand Melanie? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's been a long time coming. As you know, with brands, we all have a brand already. So every single one of us comes into this world with a brand and we start building that from scratch from the very beginning. But one of the big epiphanies for me in my own personal branding and stepping into who I am now was when I went to a networking event years ago. And one of the people at the networking event said, "Oh, are you here doing a paper for school?" I was 32. I was already a successful business owner, and he thought I was in college. So I had to really look at the inside of who I was so that I could start matching the outside with it because I felt like who I am now, which we'll probably talk about this, but my personal brand is approachable badass. And I always felt like that. My whole life, I always felt like that, but I didn't look like it on the outside. So other people had no idea. And as you know, your brand is what everyone else is saying about you, not what you're saying about yourself. So I now have the actual brand of approachable badass.
So how did you go about that? How could you adjust, align the inside and that's what you are projecting to the world?
Well, I went through a really big transformation. I had a brand strategy agency for 8 years and I loved doing brand work. I had always done it. It felt like the easy thing for me to do. So even in college, I got a communications degree. And then after building an agency, I realized I was in the wrong space, but I didn't really know how to change that. So around that time, I started shifting from a business brand, which is my branding agency, into a personal brand. And I had to really go deep inside and figure out, who actually am I? Not just who is my business, but who am I if I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet? And the biggest exercise I ever did was I sent out messages to about 800 people and I asked them to respond with questions about who I am. Who did they see me as? And how was I showing up? And what did they think of when they thought of me? And when I got all of the response back, I got about 500 responses to that survey. And everything came down to, you are an approachable badass. And so I looked at that and I looked at my life and I looked at who I was on the inside and I started looking at, what does that look like and feel like if I was to filter it on the outside as well. So over the last 7 years, I've been working on that strategy. So every time I post something that's more me, I'm like, I feel like it's more and more and more me. So it'll be a long-term evolutionary process.
Yeah, so that's what a lot of people forget about when we do this personal branding work or the work of figuring out who we are. It's such a huge part that helps us actually to figure out who we are. It's asking other people, get the feedback of others, how they see us, because there is so much more in it. It's all the blind spots we have. They see strengths that we have never really seen or realized, and then actually, that's true. And integrating that really helps us grow and become what we really are. And not only become, it's just living it what we are. And then when we can also present it to the world and elicit a certain feeling. And branding is about not only what people talk about us, but what makes them feel. Isn't that? Isn't What is your stance on that?
Yeah, branding. I've been talking about this for years, but branding is a feeling. Most people think, well, branding is the colors or the fonts or the styles or the words. Yes, all of those make up pieces of a brand, but overall, when you think of certain brands, you get a feeling about them. You either love them or you hate them or you're neutral on them. The greatest brands make you love them or hate them. They don't make you feel neutral. So I don't need everyone in the world to love me, which is something we all struggle with. We all want other people to like us and accept us and want the best for us. But at the same time, the best brands don't do that. They either have you feel really strongly one way or the other about them. So
Mhm.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I also think that strong brands are polarizing, and it's
Mhm.
not true. And we cannot make everyone love us. It's impossible. We have to take a stand, and that's our uniqueness. That's how we are, how we set ourselves apart from the rest of the world, from all the other brands, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and it's the problem is that we tend to get into people pleasing when we want
yeah,
everyone to like us. So we become softer or more gentle versions of ourselves, which is okay for certain things. Like around your family, you're not going to be like, let me tell you the stance I have on political things or religious things. Like you just don't, okay, never mind. But
yeah.
at the same time, when you take a full stand for who you are and what you believe and how you show up, there's no people pleasing in that. You're not trying to get someone just to like you by becoming someone they want.
Yeah. Strong brands have the edges. And when
Yes.
you are like pleasing everyone, you might please everyone to a certain extent, but you are not really serving in that particular way or strongly serving someone else because you only can serve if you really align with your customers' needs, when you understand their pain points. And not everyone has the same pain points. And we're here to
Right.
help them turn them around and find solutions for it. So we really need to immerse with our customers, be compassionate. And we can't be compassionate with everyone because we have different stories we went through and they
Right.
in different stories that make us us. And with these stories, we help other people as well. So because we draw on this, we get them into our realm of being that brand to follow us to develop and foster relationships with others, with our client. Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. And you have not only worked with personal brands and what you're doing right now, but you also work with corporate brands, with company brands, and you have done that for over 20 years. And I would love to know from you what is one of your favorite stories about a brand that had an epiphany while working with you?
Well, one of the last companies I worked with when I had my brand strategy agency was a global company called Five Guys Burgers and Fries. And they were known for being a competitor against McDonald's and Burger King, but at the same time, they didn't think of themselves that way. And so when people came to them, they were like, "Well, what's the differentiator? Like, why are you different from them?" And so you just have to try it. The problem was when I started working with them, their exterior brand was really incredible. Like the red and whites, you knew what you were getting when you walked in. The food was delicious. The problem was they hired a PR person and told them they couldn't say anything because they say, well, you just have to try it. That's what you say. And so I went in and sat with the company and we did a cross section of people who'd been there a long time, new people, people who had been in different levels and departments. And I asked them, what are your core values? And no one could answer.
Mm.
I asked them, what do you say when people say, what does Five Guys do? Nobody could answer. What is your culture like? They could share a bits of it, but only from the corporate perspective, not from the on the boots people who were working one on one with customers. And so everyone was having a tough time talking about it. By the time we got through all of the questions I had for them, we started putting together, well, what do you want it to feel like? What do you want people to feel like when they leave? What do you want people to say about you? And by the time I worked with the Five Guys, it's actually five brothers and their parents. And we sat in a boardroom that they had fully, they had to make it quiet because they were so worried that the company would go out of business because the brothers would fight or things would blow up. Or I can't imagine working with family. But the funny thing is they soundproofed the training room because of the fact that they wanted to make sure that everyone knew everything was going to be okay. And we walked through an exercise to talk through who are you? And I showed them this is what your team says you look like. This is what your customers say about you. This is what other people are saying about you. So what do you want them to say about you? And we put together their core values, which is based on the word real, REAL. And the first one is to be real. Like they have to be every bit of food that comes in has to be real. The people have to be real. How people feel when they come in and out has to be real. So they're like, see, this is why we don't compete against these other big burger shops. It's because we're focused on making sure the entire experience is a real experience. So that was the big epiphany they had, was they didn't have to just say, you just have to try it. They got a chance to put together a training manual for people to talk about how they hand tear their lettuce every day, how they slice their tomatoes and they're always fresh, how that if they run out of buns because they make them locally, they stop making burgers. So making sure that people know how they feel, that was the biggest part of their epiphany.
Yeah, branding starts with internal branding within an organization. It's about the culture, it's about the shared values we live by. And each individual is a personal brand within an organization. So it's
Yes.
really important to get this different layers of branding, I would say, aligned or united. We have the corporate brand and the organizational brand, and then we have also the individual brands, the personal brands. So if they are not aligned, you cannot move forward as a strong brand, because whatever happens internally shines to the outside world as well. Because what we are living is reflected in the outside world. So, how can we make sure that our branding, the internal branding and the external branding of an organization is aligned, so that we can shine as a strong organization, as a strong corporate brand and stand for
Well,
something?
whether yeah, exactly. So whether you're a one person shop and you are the brand, or you have a huge team, every single person you work with, whether they're an employee or a subcontractor or even a vendor, all of those people have to be on brand. So knowing what the business brand looks like is super clear. And then going into how are we hiring? And like I just said, even the vendors you're working with have to be on the same page, because they're interfacing with your clients. Even if that client never meets that person, there's a feeling that goes with. And I talk about energy a lot, about how branding is all about the energy you're putting into it. And so thinking about, I host retreats, and a lot of times we're doing them all over the world. And I can't use the same yoga instructor or the same breath work person or the same chef at every place. So I have to hire that vendor to make sure they're on brand. So they're talking about it the way I would talk about it, so that they can add to the experience, not remove from the experience. So we're very careful to think about when we're hiring on any level, employee, full time, part time, or vendor and subcontractor, that they're all on the same page.
Yeah. And it's not only living it, but also like communicating it as
Mhm.
pivotal in an organization, and it's about storytelling. So,
Yeah.
why is it so important to create a team of storytellers?
Oh, story is the most important part of the whole brand. I mean, your brand is a feeling and you convey that feeling through story. And what I've learned over the years is storytelling isn't as easy for people as you would think. I mean, humans have been telling stories since the dawn of time. That's how we have become who we are. That's how we know our history. That's why we have books. That's why we have people who speak. But the problem is we've gotten to a point in history where had so much trauma about sharing stories that now people are afraid to share their story. So even in a company, when let's say I'm hiring a new employee and I ask them, can you share a story about a time when you had a really tough time at work and how did you handle it? That could also be construed as like, oh no, but if I don't do this perfectly or it's not right, what am I going to do? So I think the biggest part of any brand is empowering your team to be vulnerable and authentic and willing and equipped more than anything to share their stories, to share the stories of the team. So I'll take you back to Five Guys for a moment. While I was sitting with brothers, one of them asked, hey, how did we start doing milkshakes? Three of the five brothers had no idea why they started doing milkshakes. And the story was that one of their franchisors, or franchisees, I think, franchisees, they had bought a franchise and they decided, I want to make best possible milkshake because Five Guys has the best burgers and fries. So I want to make a milkshake that can match that level. And he spent $180,000 of his own money finding out how to make a perfect Five Guys milkshake. Nobody knew the story though. So if someone asked at a store, hey, when did you guys start doing shakes? Why did you start doing that? They didn't have a story to tell because no one knew the story. So that story had stayed where it was instead of filtering down to where everyone else could share the same story. Because how impressive.
Yeah.
And the fact that Five Guys ended up paying him back and more for taking the time to do that and his own money to do that, it's now in most of their stores. So equipping your people to share the story is important, but also allowing them and giving them a safe space to share their story authentically and vulnerably without worrying about it.
Yeah. And it's also important, I think, that each individual person in an organization who is appreciated as a called, let's say, personal brand for what you're here, that
Yeah.
they are really seeing their part, their worth in the organization, because they are also the ones that are telling the stories to other
Yeah.
people outside of the organization. And that is also something that has got a lot of weight. It's got a lot of power, because I remember
Mhm.
I was working for different companies. I was working for an airline. So that is always something very mystical when you talk, I was a flight attendant, or I was, yeah. Then these are the stories that people remember. And you have to really
Right.
tell good stories, because it's also the way of how you make an organization that you work for shine and make them
Mhm.
strong in the marketplace and give them a specific standing. You position them in the hearts and the minds of the other potential customers or clients. Right?
Right. Well, and being able to empower your team to do that, a lot of times people say, oh, just share your story. That's not as easy for people. Like I was saying, it's really something that we're not super empowered or equipped to do. And so I would say that if you want to have your team sharing their story and you're telling them to do that, give them the training, show them that they can do it, and give them the ability to do it from a place of power, not from a place of, oh, I hope I did this okay. And oh, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, or I got in trouble for saying this. Because I was listening to a podcast recently about trauma around storytelling and how the biggest reason we don't share our stories is because we have a history of, if we say something that other people don't like, we could be killed, we could be burned at the stake, we could be had tomatoes thrown at us on stage. There's tons of our ancestry that has history of, like, we could die or be hurt if we said something other people don't like. So then, like we were talking about, we tend to people please, or, oh, I'll just share a little of the story. And then we don't get a chance to do it from a place of power. And so being able to do that, like, I want people to love me or hate me, and being willing to stand in that with our employees, with our storytelling, knowing who are we going after and what can we share with them to help them see we're the right fit for them. That's a place of power.
Mm. Exactly. Speaking of place of power, and speaking of you also being a speaker trainer,
Mhm.
because you also help clients to quit apologizing for being awesome. So for putting ourselves out there and owning
Yeah.
it, picking up in their professional lives to advocate for themselves, right? In the room where it happens, in negotiations, or just giving a presentation within the organization or for another organization. So sometimes we are a little hesitant about that, and we are in this kind of best kept secret, and we want to, but we are afraid of doing so. So, how do you help people to stop apologizing, just ditching it and owning it instead?
If I could help the world with this as my one big thing, I feel like I would have won my lifetime. Well, one of the biggest things, and this happens more with women than men, but it still does happen with men. So I'm not discounting that by any stretch, but we tend to apologize for being here. So we walk into a room. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm late.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you for a moment? I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I have something I want to say. Oh, I'm sorry. You just took what I wanted to say when I said, why are we apologizing? Like, I watched an entire tech conference where there were, what was it, 1% of women at this tech conference. And every time a woman would get hit as a man was walking by, she would say, oh, I'm sorry. What? Like, she got looked into and she apologized for being there. So it tends to be that we have this need and this desire to apologize for being here instead of stand in our power and saying, hello, I'm here. Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for letting me shift the conversation. Thank you for saying that. And let's go this direction. And it comes from a place of power. So I tend to tell my clients and anyone who will listen at this point that if you were to walk into a meeting, even a call like this, if I was to walk on and be like we had tech issues before I even got on, my speakers wouldn't work. There was a problem. And if I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. The energy of apology would have started this conversation. And we're two powerful women who are like, yes, let's talk about brand. And we got this. This is no problem. We'll just shift it. It's fine. And we were able to do that in a place of not apologizing for something I couldn't control. We were trying to figure it out. It was fine. But being able to walk in with the energy of like, thank you so much for being patient with me. Thank you so much for just waiting a moment with me. That one shift shifts the energy of the conversation and we stand more in our power. So let's say the next meeting we have to get on, we have to walk into a room, we have a coffee shop, we're late for something. We walk in, we say, "Oh, thank you so much for being patient with me. I'm so excited to meet you today." That's because you can take a moment before and be like, I'm amazing. Like, I'm a gift. And if I'm 2 minutes late, thank you so much for waiting for me because I have something incredible to share with you because I'm showing up fully, not from a place of like, oh, I hope everything's okay. And it tends to be, again, people pleasing. If we're like, oh, I'm so sorry, you're trying to make someone feel good for something that you don't need to make them feel good for. Thank you so much for being patient with me. That comes from a place of power.
Do you have three action steps that we can take once we know we are getting into such a situation? How can we
Mm.
prepare ourselves? How can we be in this place of power or get into this place of power and stay in this place of power?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to do is notice that you're coming in a place of apology. So if you start doing that, even if you're in the middle of the meeting, you can reset for a moment. So if they are doing this before, if you're in the middle of something, you catch yourself apologizing for something, you're like, whoa, wait. Noticing is the first step to this because as soon as you start hearing yourself saying you're sorry, kind of like hearing yourself say ums all the time, you start realizing, oh, I'm saying, noticing, no, noticing. That's the first step. So just notice I'm saying I'm sorry, or I'm in a place of apology or a posture of like, I'm sorry for being here. Like, okay, notice. The second step is to reset. So I like to say, take a deep breath in and out, not just in, because then you're up in here like, it's like, ah. And you'll notice your shoulders tend to roll back and you can take up a little more space. And that's the third step. If you can find a moment just to like take up a whole bunch of space and like stretch out and be like fully in your power, it allows you to go, oh, yes, hello, I'm here. Like men do this with man spreading. They tend to put their legs wide as they're doing it. And women cross our legs and then get smaller and like deck down. What if you were to like spread your legs just a little bit? Not like, trying to be crazy with it, but and then just like allow yourself to take up space. Taking up space allows you to stop apologizing for taking up space. So noticing and then taking a deep breath in and resetting and then taking up space, you walk in with this mental step of you're welcome. You don't say that out loud because it feels a little like, okay.
Weird.
But if you were to say that, yeah, if you were to say that in your head, I can promise you most men who walk into a meeting and look really powerful are like, you're welcome. I know I'm amazing. So what if we just shut off the mental chatter of like, I'm sorry. And we said, you're welcome. In our heads, we would have a totally different energy when we walked into the room.
Okay. These are great action steps we can take. Thank you so much, Melanie. Is there anything else you want to mention in the context of personal branding? Maybe what a personal brand, a strong personal brand means to you in a few sentences?
Oh, yeah. So every one of us is born with a personal brand. And every time I say, oh, let's work on your personal brand, people will say, oh, I don't have a personal brand. I don't need a personal brand. I'm like, you have a personal brand already. So take some time to define it and get really clear on what do I want other people to feel like when they're around me? What do I want to have them feel as I leave the room or say about me when I'm gone? And what can I do to make sure every teeny little part of my life fits that specific brand? So I would say one of my favorite things to do is the exercise that I did for myself. You don't have to do this to such a big audience, but if you were to ask this one question, what 3 to 5 words define me or describe me? Ask that to your friends and family, people you love, people you work with, people who just want to be able to pour into you. They're going to be like, "Oh, that was amazing. Can you do that for me? I want to know what 3 to 5 words describe me." And so you can start sharing that. It'll allow you to just build the personal brand you know that you need to be building, and also see, does it fit? I had a client once recently who said, "I got all of these amazing answers from people and I realized they were wrong.
Mm.
They all said she's hardworking and she's the person to go to and she's the rock." And she's like, "I don't want to be that. I want to be the sweet space to come to. I want to be the hug. I want to be the lover. I want to be like the shoulder people cry on, not the one who just gets it done." She's like, "I have a lot of work to do to shift that feeling for people."
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be bad. It can just be that maybe it's not the thing you really want. So as you build your personal brand, just really starting to step into it without apology. That's my favorite part.
Amazing. Yeah. And I just did a workshop and I asked my clients to go and get some feedback. And it was just amazing what came back. And it's so engaging. It's mind blowing what's coming back. So there's a lot of things that you have as an asset that you can work on and pivot.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
So we are almost at the end, Melanie, and I would like to do my rapid fire terms with you. Are you ready to fire
I'm
them?
so ready.
All right. Storytelling.
Something that needs to be done so much more with authenticity and genuine love for other people.
How beautiful. Your favorite household brand.
Oh my goodness. That was a good one. My favorite household brand is I'm thinking of like so many different things right now because I just set it up. Oh, I'm going to say Nanoleaf. They're little pieces that you can put together to do lighting in a space. And so being able to put them together to kind of light and change space, that's one of my favorite new household brands.
Okay, great. Mindset.
Something I work on every single day, and I would ask the world to be able to take some time to focus on their own mindset each day as they wake up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Women empowerment.
Necessary, continuing and necessary.
Yeah. And brands.
Brands. Something that most people don't fully understand and believe that isn't necessary, but is everywhere all the time and is showing up in our faces. So stop ignoring it.
Congratulations. Yes, I totally agree to that. Melanie, where can listeners find you?
You can head over to melaniespring.com or just Google Melanie Spring. You'll see my short hair everywhere.
Yes. Thank you so much, Melanie, for being my guest today on BrandsTalk. And it was a pleasure having you here talking about personal branding and why brands are important and why we should say welcome instead of apologizing. Thank you so much, Melanie.
Thanks for having me.